Ladies and gentlemen, welcome along with the 84 Miss World contestant to Spain's Costa del Sol.
Last night I dreamt of one Pedro, just like I'd never gone. He knew the song, a young man with eyes like the desert. It all seems like yesterday, not far away.
I fell in love with Juanita, just like she'd never gone. I knew the song, a young girl with eyes like the desert. I prayed that those days would last, they went so fast. Tropical, the Latin breeze, all of nature wild and free. This is where I long to be, España, Juanita. And when the guitars played, the song would set so high, ring through my ears and sting my eyes, a Spanish lullaby.
I want to be where the sun warms the sky. When it's time for siesta, you can watch them go by. Beautiful faces, no cares in this world, where a girl loves a boy and a boy loves a girl.
Tropical, the Latin breeze, all of nature wild and free. This is where I long to be, España, Juanita. And when the guitars play, the sound would set so high, ring through my ears and sting my eyes, your Spanish lullaby. España, 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 Juanita. Ole!
Ladies and gentlemen, the Ken Ward dancers together with the Miss World contestants. Now from the Town Hall in Malaga, the Miss World National Costume Parade.
Miss American Virgin Islands
is Kathy May Sitaram, and she's a student from St. Croix.
Miss Argentina. This is Gabriela Madeira. She's a student and she comes from Buenos Aires. Miss Australia
is Catherine Bushell, and she's a fashion model from Sydney.
Miss Austria. This is Alexandra Verbanschitz. She's a student and she comes from Graz. And Miss Bahamas
is Natasha Roll, and she's a clerk from Nassau.
Miss Barbados. Farida Kola is a secretary and she comes from Bridgetown. Miss Belgium.
Daisy van Kouwenberg, and she's a student from Linden.
Miss Belize. This is Paul Young. She's a draftswoman and she's from Belize City. And Miss Bermuda
is Sophia Canonier, and she's a dancer from Warwick East.
Miss Bolivia. Claudia Naza is a teacher and she comes from Santa Cruz. Miss British Virgin Islands
is Nelda Farrington, and she's a research assistant from Tortola.
And Miss Bulgaria. This is Sonia Vasileva. She's a singer and she comes from Varna. Miss Canada
is Morgan Fox, and she's a receptionist from Richmond.
Miss Cayman Islands. Melissa McTaggart is self-employed. She comes from Grand Cayman. Miss Chile
is Maria Aldunate, and she's a dress designer from Santiago.
Miss China Taiwan. This is Yi Ning Wu. She's a student and she comes from Taipei. Miss Colombia
is Yasmin Oliveros, and she's a student from Bahia Solano.
Miss Cook Islands. This is Annie Wigmore. She's a clerk and she comes from Titicaca. Miss Costa Rica
is Virginia Steinberth, and she's a student from San Jose.
Miss Curacao. Anushka Kova is a student and she lives in Willemstad. And Miss Cyprus
is Aphrodite Theophanos, and she's a sales assistant from Paphos.
Miss Denmark. Suzanne Johansson is a student and she comes from Copenhagen. Miss Dominican Republic.
Maria Martinez, a student, and she's from Santo Domingo.
Miss Ecuador. And Cristina Lopez is a student. She comes from Guayaquil. Miss Egypt.
Dina El Nagar is a student, and she's from Gizeh.
Miss El Salvador. Carla Hasbun is a student and she comes from San Salvador. Miss Finland
is Nina Anderson, and she's a fashion model from Lahti.
And Miss France. Claudia Fritolini is a grand stewardess. She comes from Ilzach. Miss Germany
is Katja Munch, and she's a student from Frankfurt.
Miss Ghana. Giyu Amoa is a student. She comes from the Volta region. Miss Gibraltar
is Tatiana de Soisa, a marketing consultant, and she's from Gibraltar.
And Miss Greece. Ariadne Malona is a student. She comes from Crete. Miss Guam
is Rita May Pangelinan, and she's a consumer sales representative from Windward Mills.
Miss Guatemala. This is Mariluz Aguilar. She's a student and she comes from Guatemala City. Miss Guyana.
Christina Jardine, and she's a student who comes from Georgetown.
Miss Holland. Angela Vischer is a model and she lives near Rotterdam.
Miss Honduras.
Is Alina Diaz, a student from Choluteca.
Miss Hong Kong.
Michelle Reese works in television, and she comes from Kowloon.
Miss Iceland.
Is Linda Pietusdottir, a hotel receptionist, and she's from Vopnafjordur.
And Miss India.
Anuradna Kotor, she's an interior design and a fashion model. She comes from Bombay.
Miss Ireland.
Is Colette Jackson. She's a fashion model from Coolock.
Miss Isle of Man.
Victoria O'D is a part-time model, and she lives in Douglas.
Miss Israel.
Ganit Cohen. She's a student, and she comes from Tel Aviv.
Miss Italy.
Julia Gemmo is a student, and she lives in Udine.
And Miss Jamaica.
Is Andrea Haynes, a student who comes from Kingston.
Miss Japan.
This is Kazumi Sakubo. She's a student, and she comes from Kobe.
Miss Kenya.
Is Diana Naylor, and she's a tourist officer who comes from Mombasa.
Miss Republic of Korea.
Yeon-hee Choi is a sports commentator, and she lives in Seoul.
And Miss Lebanon.
Is Silvana Samaha, a student from Beirut.
Miss Liberia.
This is Ollie White. She's a student, and she comes from Nimba.
Miss Luxembourg.
Is Chantal Schanbacher, and she's in the family hotel business in Altveer.
Miss Macau.
Helena Lowe Branco is a secretary, and she comes from the city of Macau.
Miss Malaysia.
Is Sue Choi Foon Wong, and she's in sales in Penang.
Miss Malta.
Josette Camilleri is a computer machine operator, and she lives in Maza.
Miss Mauritius.
Is Veronique Ash, a student who hails from Beaubassin.
Miss Mexico.
Cecilia Cervera is a student, and she lives in Mexico City.
Miss New Zealand.
Is Lisa Corban. She's a dentist assistant and comes from Waikato.
Miss Nigeria.
This is Omasan Bua. She's a student, and she comes from Wari.
Miss Norway.
Is Rita Paulson, and she's a saleswoman from Mirvoll near Oslo.
And Miss Papua New Guinea.
Erua Taino is a sales representative from Port Moresby.
Miss Paraguay.
Is Maria Jose Miranda. She's a student from Asuncion.
Miss Peru.
This is Martha Kayak. She's a psychology student, and she lives in Lima.
Miss Philippines.
Is Dana Navadev, and she's a student from Manila.
Miss Poland.
This is Joanna Kapinska. She's a student, and she comes from Szczecin.
Miss Portugal.
Is Helena Laureano, and she's a model who hails from Sisimbra.
Miss St. Kitts and Nevis.
Haley Cassius is a clerk, and she lives in Newtown.
And Miss Sierra Leone.
Is Tiwila Ojukutu, and she's a receptionist from Freetown.
Miss Singapore.
That's Sarah Teo. She's an auditor, and of course she lives in Singapore.
Miss Spain.
Is Susana de la Llave, and she's a public relations officer who comes from Figueras.
Miss Sri Lanka.
Michelle Coyle-Mayer is a student, and she comes from Colombo.
Miss Swaziland.
Vandeka Magagula is a student, and she comes from Manzini.
Miss Sweden.
This is Cecilia Horberg. She's a model, and she lives in Gothenburg.
And Miss Switzerland.
Is Karina Berger, and she's a photographic model who comes from Zurich.
Miss Thailand.
Thavipon Hunslip is a student, and she lives in Bangkok.
Miss Trinidad and Tobago.
Is Wendy J.Q. Baptiste, and she's a student from Aruca.
Miss Republic of Turkey.
This is Ezra Suma. She's a model, and she comes from Istanbul.
Miss Turks and Caicos.
Is Doreen Dickinson, and she's a secretary who comes from Palm Grove.
Miss Uganda.
Nazma Yamal Mohammed is a trainee secretary, and she lives in Entebbe.
Miss United Kingdom.
Is Kirsty Roper, and she's a student who hails from Staffordshire.
Miss United States of America.
This is Diana Magana. She's a student, and she comes from Palos Verdes.
Miss Uruguay.
Is Giselle Silva, and she's a student who comes from Montevideo.
Miss Venezuela.
Is Emma Rabe. She's a model, and she lives in La Guira.
Miss Western Samoa.
Is Noah Hill, and she's a student who hails from Apia.
And finally, Miss Yugoslavia.
Susanna Zunica is a student, and she lives in Split.